good. All right, so tonight we are learning about the money market. The money market. Just like any other market, there are two aspects to the money market. There is demand for money and supply of money. The demand for money and the supply of money. The first type of the demand for money is called the, let's write this down, transaction. On the left-hand side, write this down. Transaction. The transaction demand for money. Every time a good is purchased, right, or a service is purchased, we need money to make that good or service transaction take place, right? So the transaction demand for money. So if you think about in the economy today, right, you go down to your local convenience store and you buy some, who knows, some candy, you buy some gum, you buy some gasoline. Those are all transactions. You get your heating and your air conditioning service this spring so that your air conditioning is working for when it gets hot out. That's a service. Right? You go to see the dentist, that's a service. All those transactions are part of the macroeconomy. So the transaction demand for money varies, let's write this underneath it, varies directly with nominal GDP. It varies directly with nominal GDP. Now what do we mean by nominal GDP? Nominal GDP is gross domestic product which has not been adjusted for changing the price level. So GDP stated at the prevailing year's price level. So simply, every time a transaction takes place in this year, which happens to be 2012, right? Okay, we're squeezing in there. Right? Varies directly with nominal GDP. Right? So the quicker economic activity takes place, the more or the higher the transaction demand for money. The slower the economic activity, the lower the transaction demand for money. Obviously, during a recession, there's less transaction demand for money than there is during periods of rapid economic activity during economic expansion. So it varies with the business cycle. The second type of demand for money is the assets. Right, so write ASS. Get it? ET. The asset demand for money. All right, now, there's an opportunity cost to holding money as an asset. So when is it costly for you to hold money as an asset? Well, what's the problem with having money, like in your wallet or under your pillow at home, right, in a great big freezer in your basement? If you have money in that form as an asset, it doesn't bear any what? Interest. It doesn't pay any interest. So the asset demand for money, right, varies inversely with the interest rate. Let's write that down. It varies inversely with the interest rate.
3 minutes and 3 seconds.
Varies inversely with the interest rate. So on our graph, the money market graph, I'm going to write this down here so somebody knows. Interest rate. Very good. All right, let's write down money market on the graph we've already drawn. Up top, yeah. Here's our money market. On the vertical axis is the domestic real interest rate. That's why we have I, right? That's why we have a little cursive I there for interest rate. Typically when we study supply and demand, we have P for price of some good or service or some resource, right? But in the money market, it's I, right? It's I. Now, the supply part of the money market is easy, right? So if we start right below that M in market, right below there, a little bit lower, a little higher, and we draw a straight line down all the way to the horizontal axis, straight down, there we go, and we stop, and right next to it up top, we write a big S, yep, to the right of that, and with a little tiny M next to it for money. Right? That's the supply of money. So why is the supply of money completely vertical? Why is it completely vertical? Remember when we studied elasticity, we said if the supply of money, if the supply of something it was vertical, it was completely inelastic, which meant quantity did, like, in theory, right, we could go out and count up every single solitary dollar in circulation. So there is a fixed supply of money that circulates in the economy today. Right, today happens to be what? May 8th? May seventh. May seventh, right? Yeah, because Cinco de Mayo was on Saturday. May seventh, right? So the supply, what institution in the United States controls the nation's money supply? What institution controls the nation's money supply? Very good, let's write that down on the right there, right? So, supply of money controlled by the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve, yeah, you can write down, Federal Reserve controls the nation's supply of money. Federal Reserve controls the nation's supply of money. So, where the supply of money comes together with demand for money, we have equilibrium in the money market, and what does that tell us? Equilibrium, it tells us the domestic real interest rate, right? Nation's supply, money supply. Alright, good. Now, where the supply and demand come together, put a point where they come together, and then draw a dotted line over to the vertical axis. Perfect. And in the margin, let's write down 4%. On the left, in the margin, let's write down 4%. So today, the interest rate, given the supply of money and the demand for money, is 4%. Right? So this is not the prime rates. This is the money in the money market. You would have to go through a loanable funds graph, which would be highly similar to this. But this is close enough. For somebody learning macroeconomics for the first time, an introductory student, right? Now we understand where interest rates come from, right? Interest rates are determined by the supply of money and the demand for money. All right, now here's the key question. If the Federal Reserve controls the nation's money supply, they also control what? Interest rates. They also control interest rates. Let's get a different colored chalk and be real fancy here. Let's get the green one on the right there. It's bluish green. Let's get that. What happens in the United States if the Federal Reserve increases the nation's money supply? Let's draw a new curve that shifts to the right, because any increase in the rate curve is a shift. Yeah, right there. Let's draw straight down. Yeah. Right? Let's label that SM with a little 1 next to it. Well, if the Fed increases the nation's money supply, what happens to the interest rate? Goes down, right? So let's draw a dotted line across. And let's just for sake call that 3%. And let's get another different colored chalk. And of course, if the Fed were to decrease the nation's money supply, we would have an increase in interest rate. So another color. How are we doing on time?
8 minutes and 11 seconds.
All right. So, this is what we refer to as monetary policy. The Fed controls the nation's money supply to affect interest rates. Let's write 5%. And in our next lecture, we're going to talk about the tools of monetary policy. That's my perfect stop.